Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Sparks podcast, where naturopathy meets neuroscience. I'm Parker Malev, the naturopath.
And I'm Emma Johnson, the neuroscientist. Join us on this adventure as we delve into the depths of nutrition, nature, medicine, and the mind,
where every insight sparks discussion and debate. Hey guys, welcome to episode 8. Today we're so excited to be here. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever taken any kind of science class in the high school or even maybe middle school level, you probably know what evolution is. And if you've been listening to the podcast up until now, you probably know what naturopathy is and medicine in general. But what you might not know is that the two go hand in hand. And today we're going to talk about how and why. So even if you haven't heard of it, we're going to go through some definitions just real quick so you have a baseline.
So for evolution, that's what I'm studying. Evolution is the process of changes that lead to long-lasting adaptations. They usually have a benefit to the organism, but they don't have to. It's really if that stays in the population, it's because it has a benefit, which is what we call natural selection. But it's not the only thing that leads to evolution. But natural selection is why adaptations remain in population. There are a lot of misconceptions about evolution, so if you ever want a video specifically about evolutionary misconceptions, let us know, because we've been thinking about doing it.
And for the sake of today, we recognize that not everybody believes that evolution is the basis of science, but it is used to determine most of how medicine is done today. And we're going to go into that, but just for today, in the sake of our argument, this is the viewpoint that we're coming from. That being said, naturopathy, which is kind of difficult to define because it depends on what website you look on. If you go to Harvard, they're going to tell you that it's anything outside of what is normally practiced, so alternative medicine sources. If you go to a naturopathic website, they're going to tell you that it's anything that is done in order to heal the person, the individual, using their mind, their body, their spirit, encouraging the body to self-heal. Whether this is through different therapies, herbs, mind-body practices, anything like that. So it is pretty broad. That definitely leaves us with a lot of links to nature and to science as a whole, which is why we're going to talk about how they go together with evolution today. Understanding the principles of evolution is how we're going to understand how a person needs to be treated. And this comes from a bunch of different ways. So we're just going to list out a few, and then we're going to look at the body and how it is currently and what led to that change.
Yeah, so one thing that is really interesting from an evolutionary perspective is allergies. Our bodies are very, very interesting from an allergic standpoint. Allergies are our body's response to any sort of foreign material, whether that's food, dust, pollen, etc. And allergies to things like pollen and dust is most likely because these things were poisonous to us or dangerous to us in early evolutionary history. So our immune system developed responses like watery eyes, runny noses, coughing to get these foreign substances out of our body. So the immune system that we have today evolved in vertebrates in order to deal with diseases and pathogens in their ecological niche. So where they live, what areas they inhabited, and what animals, pathogens, diseases are in that habitat. Allergies developed later on in evolutionary history after the development of immune systems in order to create faster responses for pathogens that the body recognized and already knew how to deal with. And these are called IgE responses. These aren't IgE antibody responses are not the only thing that cause allergies. Our antibodies all work together really closely, but that's the big one that people talk about. And these IgE responses most likely originated to deal with pathogens that were too large for other parts of the immune system to deal with, like parasites and like worms, helminths, things like that.
Right, like how Emma said, we definitely have more than just IgE. And this IgE that we're saying is it's called immunoglobulin E, and it's an antibody that your body can produce in response to a certain item. So like your most common IgE allergies are going to be it's like grass and things that would require an EpiPen if it got too bad. There are some cases where it can cause low-grade inflammation, but that's more common in your IgG allergies. There's four of the most common IgE immunoglobulins is M, A, E, and G. And the two more important ones are going to be E and G. M and A are for more each other. So this is super important in alternative medicine because it helps you determine some extra ways to lower inflammation in your body. The main goal here is to lower it as much as possible to lessen the burden on the rest of your organs. So if your liver is having difficulty detoxing normal substances in your body, you're not going to want all of your resources dedicated to a different spot, right? So it's just if you like the liver detox trends, those are a little iffy. The concept can be great, but the whole thing is just reduce the amount of work that a certain organ has to do so that it can focus on the normal aspects. So the whole thing between sensitivities and allergies is really just whether or not you're going into shock. And this, again, like Emma said, this was developed to create a faster response for pathogens that your immune system is still involved with, but it has a attack option instead of just a, here, leave please kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't know as much about, like, what we do to treat IgE responses, but I do know that it's really important to know where these responses came from to understand how to treat them. So, we look back in evolutionary time to understand why the IgE response developed and how it became out of hand and caused allergies, because allergies aren't something that we've been dealing with forever, it's actually something pretty recent. One of the most common explanations for why we have IgE responses that get out of hand is because we're no longer exposed to the pathogens as often as the immune system is like primed to respond to them. So our immune system, our IgE response was originally to protect against parasites, but here, especially in first world countries like America, we're not encountering parasites that often, which means that our IgE response isn't sure what to do anymore. It becomes so underactivated to the point that it becomes overactivated in other parts of the system that lead to allergies. This is so interesting because they've actually done studies on people with allergies and they found that they're also more susceptible to parasites because this IgE response is overactive in the area of allergies, but now underactive in the area of parasites, which is what it was meant to originally do, which is just like blows my mind that we're able to see the impacts of this over like it was originally meant for parasites, then it got out of hand, and now it's towards things like allergies to the point where it's struggling with the parasites again, and they're more susceptible to parasites. Like that's so cool. Well, sorry,
Oh
that's
yeah,
I went
the
off on a little
adaptive
tangent there.
you're good. The adaptive cycle of all of these processes is an astonishing thing because again, like
Yeah.
if you look at, I mean, we're going to go into it a little bit later, but the way that we process our food is completely different than how it was way, way, way long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our society has adapted so quickly. Our society has changed, but our bodies have not had the time to actually catch up and be able to shift to these changes. So that's why we're seeing chronic disease now that we didn't see 100 years ago even. Back
It's like,
closer to the Industrial Revolution, that was really the mark where we started seeing
yeah.
chronic disease develop, and we never had that. I mean, we had it, we obviously had it, just maybe not well recorded, but the occurrence of it. I mean, we don't more people die from heart disease than traumatic injuries, nearly, not quite,
Right.
but like we're seeing more hospital stays from that than we are from anything else. And that's where majority of the money goes to as well, is preventable surgeries.
Mhm. And the crazy thing too is things like heart disease, although they do increase as you get older, like the likelihood of getting heart disease, it's not something that is hugely impacted by how old we are. Because you hear a lot of people, they'll say, like, well, we have these chronic diseases because we live longer, because we have the medicine to live longer. But that's not something that just comes along because we live longer. Like, I can understand cancer, especially late stage cancers, but there are also children's cancers that are more common and stuff like that. Like, although
Childhood
it's true
obesity
that
too.
right, childhood obesity,
Mhm.
childhood traumas, everything like that. It's we think of it as like, oh, we live longer, so now we have more diseases that we wouldn't interact with. And we're going to get into this later. So I'm going to leave it there, but just like thinking about we do live longer, so we do have more diseases, but not every single disease that we're encountering, especially like long-term chronic diseases, are not something that just pop up because we're
Mhm.
living longer. There are other things that are causing them, which is
Yeah,
so
and that's
interesting.
that's a more alternative medicine perspective too,
Hmm.
because, I mean, the first thing they ask you is, "How old are you?" at the doctor's office, you know? That's
Yeah.
gonna be what determines whether you're healthy or not. So you can
Hmm.
be I'm gonna give the example of, like, colon cancer. You start screenings for colon cancer if you don't have a previous history, you start screenings for that at 45. How I'm a big proponent of testing regularly, comprehensive testing regularly. If that was less expensive, I think that would be the most ideal thing ever, is when you go to the doctors and you get a checkup. It's an actual checkup, like, where's your body at? What does your blood count look like? What does your thyroid function look like? What does your liver and kidney function look like? Because if we did that more routinely in these younger people, as the chronic disease rate goes up in younger people, why are we not testing at younger ages? Why is it
Hmm.
45 for colon cancer when that age is slowly going down?
Yeah, especially like a lot of people are told, a lot of women are told, oh, you don't have to get your pap smear until you're 30, your first pap smear. But ovarian cancer is getting younger and younger, and it
Yeah,
was only recently that they lowered the recommended age for your first pap smear. That should
right.
not, that should be something that if you're going to the OBGYN, if you're sexually active or
Mhm,
old enough to go to the OBGYN, like 18 and above, that's should be a regular routine if
right.
you're able to afford it. I mean, you should be able to afford it, but
Yeah, regular checkups. Even I've read on Harvard Public Medical Publishing, it was just a doctor, anecdotally talking about how often he thinks people should get checkups. And he was
mhm.
like, "Oh, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you can, every 2 or 3 years you can come in." And it's like, this is your insurance covers yearly.
Yeah,
Why tell these young people who are, quite honest, they're setting up the future of their health in their
right.
early days while they're in college. What are they eating? You need this early intervention. That's why these diseases are becoming more common. We're not able to adapt quick enough biologically, so we need to adapt as a society. That's the real caveat here. Like, evolution is really important for understanding that idea, because we're
Right.
going to die in the time. We're just gonna Yeah. We're just gonna die so much sooner if we're not checking this. And your example with the pap smear is so much better than my colon cancer example. I just that just because we have higher instances of endometriosis and infertility. We have
Yep.
much higher rates of PCOS, um, in younger women. You know how much money goes into fertility treatments every year at this point?
And yet we
It's
still don't
insane.
have research about women's
Right.
reproductive systems.
Oh
Like,
my
what the
gosh.
heck? We're putting so much money into treating these women's fertility issues, but we're not going to try to get to the issue here, which is
Right.
not that women just spontaneously have fertility issues. Like,
Right, it's just developed from early on. I've
right.
gotten my hormone testing done, and I have little to no estrogen and little to no testosterone. I am in postmenopausal menopausal range. This is more of a personal anecdote, of course, but if I had not ever checked that myself on my own intuition, then I wouldn't be able to have children when I actually wanted to. I would have to go and try to fix this problem, and then maybe if it doesn't work, go put thousands and upon thousands of dollars into these fertility treatments.
But back to allergies a little bit. I know we went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think both of us are really passionate about this topic. So that might happen a couple of times. Be ready. Um, the big question that ends up happening is how do we take the evolutionary knowledge that we have and use it in the present day in medicine? And there are some doctors, a very controversial um, therapy for allergies is actually called helminth therapy. Helminths are a type of parasite. They're a worm-like parasite, and they treat the patient with helminths. They basically infect them with the parasite to base sort of lower their immune response to allergies by bringing it back to what it's actually supposed to treat. And I think it's really interesting. There definitely needs to be a lot more research, but I think it's going in the right direction of understanding why our body is the way it is and using that to treat the issue. But very controversial because you're
Yeah,
infecting the
definitely.
patient with another issue.
Yeah,
So,
it sounds kind of like the chicken pox parties that the boomers
yeah.
would do, which is interesting because it's not, it's non-fatal. I've always questioned whether or not a chickenpox party is actually a good idea because it's non-fatal. You get it once when you're younger. I don't know, because then if you get it when you're older, I don't know. It's a weird concept overall because you are infecting somebody intentionally and you run the risk of it causing problems down the line. It's definitely not something a naturopath would choose to do. They would
Hmm.
probably go other routes first, and then if they're an
Yeah.
integrative specialist, they might come back around to stuff like that. But it does sound like an ND's nightmare to infect someone with a parasite on purpose.
Yeah.
I can understand immunotherapy with like contact therapy with more common allergies like the grass and milk and pet hair, that kind of stuff. The idea of a parasite, intentional
Yeah.
parasite injection is wild. Again, though, if the research is solid, then
It's an
then who
interesting thing to
cares?
look into.
Yes.
I think what you were saying about the chickenpox party is actually a good analogy of like Hellman therapy versus immunotherapy. Just a quick intro for people who don't know what immunotherapy is. It basically teaches your body to recognize the allergen and then get used to it so you no longer have an allergic reaction. So like small doses of your allergen to exposed um to your immune system so that it's able to work as it's meant to and not get quote distracted by the allergen. I feel like the chickenpox party is sort of like Hellman therapy in the same way that immunotherapy is like vaccinations. I know not everybody is into vaccinations, and as somebody who's um, more towards the modern medicine side of things, although I think naturopathy is really cool, I feel like vaccines are sort of like immunotherapy in the sense that it's being able to teach your body to get used to it without actually having to expose yourself to the thing that's actually dangerous. So you're giving yourself a less dangerous version so that your body is prepared to actually handle the symptoms.
Right. Yeah, it's a different type. There's acquired immunity and then there's artificial acquired immunity, and that's the distinction there. So you could
Right.
have, like, for those of you who are not in favor of vaccines, there are different types of immunotherapy. Like a chickenpox party is considered a natural
Right. Right.
acquired immunity, whereas a vaccine is obviously it's artificial acquired immunity, even if it does have the strains of the virus itself. But the difference is that one is a small controlled dose, and the other is you are getting the illness, and then your body learns how to make those antibodies. They're both viable from a theory side. Whether or not you agree with one or the other, that's totally different. But the way it's applied is through your antibodies and your allergies. And the way that you
Right.
acquire them, that's the part that's a little controversial. All right, now, allergies are not something that everybody deals with. Some people will say that everybody has food sensitivities, which I think is kind of true. I think everybody's born with something that their body just doesn't deal with very well. That's why lactose intolerance is so common. That being said, a more practical application of this is going to be nutrition and exercise.
Yes, our body is evolutionarily designed to process certain foods in certain ways. Hunting and gathering has been the way that we have obtained food for 90% of human history. We developed agriculture around 12,000 years ago, and hominins, Homo sapiens that we are today have been around for 330,000 years. Nowadays, our diet is determined by our culture, not really our evolutionary processes, which can cause confusion, for lack of a better word, within our body.
So like this goes right back to what we were talking about with the change only about a century ago. So technically, grocery stores is ruining us, which sounds weird. Essentially, it gives us a ton of options instead of forcing us to rely purely on what's available in our environment. However long ago, in the past centuries, it was we did not have the option to go pick up a sweet treat at the grocery store whenever we were feeling sad. I'm a victim of sweet treat culture, and I know you are too, Emma.
I so am.
So this
I
is
want
this
a
is good
sweet
and
love
bad
treat.
for us because our hunter and gather instincts, and Emma's going to talk more about this, but our hunter and gather instincts is to acquire as much fat and sugar as we possibly can. So when we walk into these grocery stores and there's a whole aisle of ho-hos and ding-dongs, what do you think we're gonna do?
Ho-hos and ding-dongs.
Have you never had a hostess woman? I
I
don't
actually
think
haven't.
I don't think I had ever had one until somebody in like a summer camp was like, "Hey, you want a Twinkie?" I was like, what?"
Wait, small tangent for the people out there and for you. For my elementary school like capstone project thingy, a group of friends and I decided we were going to do research on Twinkies and see like how long they stayed preserved. So we took a Twinkie in a wrapper, a Twinkie not in a wrapper, and then I think like an apple or something, and we put them out. And we were like, we're gonna leave them for the next 3 months that we're in school. And both the Twinkie in the wrapper and the Twinkie out of the wrapper did not change. One kid
That's
ate the
insane.
one in the wrapper after 3 months, and he said it tasted exactly the same. And we left it for 3 more years. I came back. This was in like second grade. I came back when I was in fifth grade, and the Twinkie was still there and looked exactly
Dude,
the same. It was disgusting.
I know that the preservatives are supposed to keep it fresh, but at what point is
That's
every
too
ounce of
much.
nutrients in that thing just dead? That's the other thing with preserved foods that people have a problem with. This includes canned goods and such, is the longer it sits, the less nutrients it has.
Yep.
Their half-lives are like minuscule. That's why like flash freezing is usually considered a pretty good option, flash frozen produce, because it's chopped and then like it's frozen immediately, meaning it preserves nutrients for longest. Doesn't matter with these things. I had a food fight for my I don't know how old I was in like the 7th grade, but I had a food fight for my birthday that was in the 7th. I can't do math. And one of the items that we had was ramen noodles. Those are everything, like everything else washed away in the rain because it was like puddings and nacho
Right.
cheese and stuff. Sorry, this sounds super wasteful looking back on it, but it was the most amazing, fun thing I've ever done in my life. Thank you, Mom. That those ramen noodles sat there for over a year,
Oh,
unpackaged and cooked, mind you. They were cooked. I understand like an uncooked noodle being having like a super long shelf life, but like a cooked. Anyways,
that is
moving
so
on.
gross. Okay, yeah.
Moving on.
So, what are we supposed to be eating is the $1 million question. Long story short, it's kind of difficult to tell. In the time of hunter-gatherers, our ancestors, our diet was what we could find around us at the time, what we could hunt and gather.
Bugs.
Bugs,
Bugs.
lots of roots, lots of red meats. This meant that our diet also changed with the season and was always native plants and animals, specifically native to Africa, where we originated, Homo sapiens originated from evolutionarily. Grocery stores, like Parker said, kind of ruined that. Our diet at that time in Africa, it consisted, and also when we moved up towards Asia, it mainly consisted of plants like dark leafy greens, seeds, nuts. We ate tons of tubers. 80% of our diet was made up of these plant-based animals, and then the other 20% was made up of wild animals and fish. And I feel like 20% is not really made up by wild animals and fish anymore.
No, 20%. A good solid 20% is ho-hos and ding dongs, y'all.
Oh yeah, it
Actually,
totally is.
for me it's not sweets. I don't really like sweets. It's my little cup of Cheez-Its here that I'm so
I
addicted to
love
white
cheese.
cheddar Cheez-Its, dude. It's such a problem. But like majority of like, if it's not sweets, savory stuff can still be bad for you too. Like it's not just sweet sugary things. It can be your cup of Cheez-Its that you okay, not a cup of Cheez-Its, but like if you sit down and you hound a whole whatever, this is not relevant to this. This is not what I was going to actually say, Emma, by
You
the
know
way.
what? as Homo sapiens, which we are Homo sapiens, we began developing large brain mass, a larger brain mass than other hominin species in the area. Hominin is just the word for other type of Homo species like Homo erectus, um, Aust I can't think of them off the Australopithecus. I know lots, I swear. I study evolutionary
No,
biology.
I was
I'm
laughing at
getting
Homo
my minor.
erectus.
Oh, stop. No.
Homo erectus. God, that
Homo
sounds like a slur.
neanderthalensis. Yeah, so Homo sapiens, we started developing larger brains than Homo erectus, a normal word for another type of hominin species. And because of this, our brains require a lot more fats and proteins, especially animal fats and proteins.
So this is also something that is really important for both naturopaths and dietitians because what somebody has adapted to eat, whether it be in their culture or the way that they grew up. Like in the States, we have cultural differences, but a lot of it is just like the melting pot thing. So a lot of naturopaths will not set a single diet plan that works for every different age group and every gender. It has to be based off of what that person is actually used to eating. So if you were to have a person of an Indian cultural background come into your office, you're going to base it off what they have been eating. So,
Mhm.
if this person is eating predominantly Indian type food, you're not going to give them a diet that's like more Caucasian. And when I say Caucasian,
Peanut
I mean
butter and
like
jelly.
peanut butter. It's not going to be peanut butter and jellies and, just salad, like iceberg lettuce salads. It's going to be, we're going to focus more on what they're actually used to eating. So we're going to keep that same spice profile. You're going to use, like, an Asian diet is a really good example of that. You're not going to, an Asian diet, their breakfasts are most commonly eggs. It's like savory. It's eggs, a small cup of white rice, miso soup, and a piece of fish. That's what I've
Mhm.
seen typically. But you're not going to take that person and say, okay, you're having oatmeal and a piece of bacon for breakfast. This is your ideal breakfast. You've got to take
Yeah.
what they're used to because that's what their culture is. That's even just from a respect spam. It's not even from a respect standpoint, purely because this is what their body has adapted to deal with.
Mhm. And our bodies, we adapt both evolutionarily and within the present day. Like we adapt to our cultures and stuff like that, which is really important to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if I know there are plenty of people who don't believe in human evolution, which is totally fine, but even small adaptations have huge impacts on what we eat and
Right.
how we process foods.
Everything in the body is based off of both negative and positive feedback loops, and that it doesn't matter if you understand that or not. It just means it's cyclic. If
Hmm.
something rises, something lowers to compensate for that rising. That's why if you go on a sugar detox, which is very popular these days, you feel really crappy for
Yep.
I think it's like 3 days is the normal hump you got to get over. But then after that, you normalize. And whether it's good or bad, you normalize because your body's having to adapt to get used to that change. That's why
Right.
people doing keto and carnivore report feeling great after a week or two, but they struggle for that first week. It like you're going to get used to any change eventually. The harm will come later. So I'm not saying either of those three things are bad for you. I'm iffy on keto. I don't really like keto. I'm definitely iffy on carnivore. Sorry, this isn't important for right now, but like it doesn't
It's
matter
good to
whether the
know.
diet, yeah, it doesn't matter whether the diet is good or bad. It just matters how you're adapting to it
Hmm.
and the fact that you do adapt to it eventually. And that's why it matters to know this stuff.
Yeah. Homo sapiens adapted when their brains started getting bigger and they had to eat more protein and fats. They had to start migrating a lot more often because they would eat lots of different types of plants and animals, but then those plants and animals would no longer be in that area. So they would migrate and they would eat other plants and animals in another area. And they would get more variation in diet. They would be eating more animal fat, more animal protein, and even through the 330,000 years Homo sapiens have been around, that's when they split off from other Homo species. We haven't evolved much, but our food culture has changed a lot. And with that, is where we get lots of dietary issues, food allergies, obesity, nutrient deficiencies, which is sort of what Parker was talking about. Is we've our food culture, if we're just sort of not paying attention to just like eating every type of food out there, we're gonna come in contact with foods that our bodies aren't used to, aren't adapted to interacting with. And so this kind of raises the question, how are we meant to eat? And are we actually getting the diverse food requirements that we need today while also sticking to both our historical diet and also our cultural diet and how we can sort of integrate those two things?
Okay, and that most of you, actually probably not most of you, if you know who the Liver King is, unfortunately, he's kind of a good example of this. He
I was
is
gonna say
a
he's gross.
he's so gross. But like he's a super jacked swole guy who is a social media influencer to say the very least. He is popular because he promotes an ancestral type diet. That being said, he was busted for hounding steroids.
Yeah.
Totally unrelated. So we don't actually
Oh
know
yeah.
if eating an ancestral diet has much to do with your health at this point. But
His diet
if you look, his diet was rough. He ate raw liver
is not
constantly.
ancestral.
It's not? What do you mean?
His diet was not ancestral.
He would
Like
claim that
it was very, he claimed it
oh,
was
oh, oh.
ancestral and evolutionarily. It is not evolutionarily based.
Okay,
And I think
okay.
we need more research. Like that is such a cool experiment to do. Like even if it's just him, like what does happen if you just eat
Right.
what we ate evolutionarily? The only problem is he wasn't eating what we ate evolutionarily.
Right. I think
Homo
he what
sapiens cooked their food. They cooked their food and they
yeah,
ate
yeah,
vegetables.
I have seen that. I meant like more of the trend of the ancestral
Yeah.
diet, like
Yeah.
promoting that as an idea.
Yeah. Which I
It's
think is a
the way
really
he
cool
did
idea.
it. Yeah, that's why I was wondering like his the concept of his promotion could have been great because
Just don't
if
go
you're
on tea.
right, yeah, don't go on tea. Oh boy, and don't eat raw stuff just because some jack dude says to do it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I
that was
can't.
more of
The
what I
Liver
meant.
King is so funny.
I didn't mean to say that
He'll
he
just
was ancestral,
pound
by the way.
eyeballs and liver. Oh no, you're
Oh
good. I
my
just wanted to
gosh.
clarify, like, evolutionarily, we ate a lot of potatoes and tubers. We ate a lot of leafy
Right.
greens. We ate a lot of beans and lentils and all these kinds of things. And again, it made up 80% of our diet. And then
Mm-hmm.
20%, which is still a lot, 20% is a lot. Eat your meat if you can.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you can't, and if you're vegan or vegetarian for
You're
ethical and
going to
moral
eat
reasons,
less
that's
if
totally
you eat
fine.
more meat too. So if you're worried about the price, your meals are going to be smaller
They will. I
if you
mean,
integrate meat into it. You just have to
even,
calculate the price appropriately.
yeah, even just the other day, I was eating spaghetti, and I eat a lot of spaghetti because it's all they have at the dining hall that I like. Um, and for lunch, I had spaghetti with a chicken breast on top. And for dinner, I had spaghetti, but they didn't have chicken because they love
Ugh.
not having chicken. Um, And I felt so full at lunch, but I had to eat 2 times the amount of pasta to feel full at
Yep.
dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like meat is so filling and it was less food, less calories if that's what you're looking for, but
It's still important to as a
yeah.
measurement.
Yeah.
So regardless, I'm not to say that the Liver King is somebody you should emulate at all, not even
Don't
a little bit.
pound steroids,
Don't.
folks.
And don't I mean I don't know about raw liver, but just like let's just the concept of a ancestral diet is meat, greens, roots. That's about it. It's just meat and
Yeah.
vegetables. So like keto can be fine because they do include vegetables in there, but when they
Mhm.
start, cutting out like potatoes and beans and things, that's where it starts to get a little iffy.
Potatoes are such a complex starch. They're
I
so
know.
amazing.
They're pretty great. I think people
If you're
avoid it
looking
because
for
it
your
has a higher
glucose.
glycemic index.
It does have a high glycemic index, but so does your freaking coconut sugar. Well, coconut
I
sugar doesn't
know.
have your glycemic index, but it's still spiking, but it's
I
not
know.
spiking glucose because there are other types of sugars. There's sucrose, there's fructose, there's artificial sugars. Ah, okay,
Wait,
sorry.
Emma, they all convert to glucose though. except for
Well,
the artificial sugars.
but sucrose has to go through your liver, which could cause more stress on your liver, especially if you're
Oh,
eating a
does
bunch of
it?
sucrose.
I
And
didn't realize
fructose,
sucrose goes to it.
right? And fructose breaks down into one sucrose, one glucose. So that's also
Right.
sucrose. The
Dang. Yeah,
glucose
so
is
that's just
actually, yeah,
hmm,
I know, right?
interesting. That's probably why people say you shouldn't eat too much fruit, but
Well,
still, I would rather eat a ton
fruit,
of fruit.
yeah,
Yeah.
because fruit, unlike things like coconut sugar, um, what other kind of sugar alternatives are
There's
there?
date sugar. There's
Date sugars,
erythritol.
yeah, unlike those, fruit have a lot more vitamins and minerals. And
Right.
not
Yeah.
saying those sugars are bad. It is okay to have sweet treats,
Yeah.
but it's also good to realize that fruits have so many other things that are going to make you feel healthier when you eat them. They're going to make you feel happier
Definitely.
in the long term. They,
That's
yeah.
both of our criticism of keto, by the way. Sorry, this is where this tangent came from again,
Yeah.
is the mentioning of keto. On the basis of this, if you eat like how our ancestors ate, technically we are slowly adapting towards favoring high sugar diets. This is why insulin resistance is a problem, because our body is trying its best to not take in too much sugar. So if it keeps it in the bloodstream, eventually it gets put out. But that's when you get things like kidney and liver problems.
Yup.
That's when you start peeing out glucose and getting, oh, that's I'm terrified of peeing out glucose, dude. That's like your kidneys are dead. All right, so with all this talk about, liver function, kidney function, how our bodies are meant to process certain things, toxins is a concept that is very popular in the alternative medicine world right now. Or actually in like trend world too, unfortunately. Not all trends are bad, but man, I think just a general advice thing is just don't look at trends, look at research papers, look at even like a doctor's blog is a better resource than a trend. That being said, toxins are pretty popular right now, but the term itself is wildly vague because trauma can be a toxin. Trauma is, your fight or flight response produces a certain influx of chemicals that can be considered a toxin because it does produce inflammation if it continues. Now, also, there's mold, there's some synthetic molecules, some preservatives, has so many more potential toxins than anything we ever had in history. There were environmental pathogens and stuff then. There was, bacteria in the water. There was poor hygiene that led to a lot of bacterial infections. Now we don't even know how to read the ingredients in half the food we have. So it's kind of insane. But the whole idea of avoiding toxins is just to lessen the load put upon the liver so you can actually perform metabolic functions without putting a bunch of extra things in there. That's why you need to clean out your shower every week or so, like scrub it down, make sure your toilet's not getting moldy, make sure your back porch that decides it wants to grow black mold every single stupid day somehow. I'm pointing to my porch and it's so I have shutters and it's so hot and humid here that any amount of moisture just the mold's like, yeah, give me that. Anyways, but as from an adaptation standpoint, we are not ready to deal with these certain things. That's why mold is such a big problem. This is why a lot of synthetic molecules have such big impacts on our bodies. Not all, again, they all have an impact on us. Whether or not that impact is good, bad, or neutral, we don't know. So that's why I think the toxin culture is kind of okay because things are so unknown at the moment that I personally would rather not have certain things and have peace of mind that I'm not overloading my system versus being okay with them just because they might not do anything to me. Controversial, again. I just don't like using things like bleach and strong cleaners and stuff because I'm a baby and I don't like how they smell. Whatever. But that's
I
just one concept that's fairly popular now.
I sadly am forced to use bleach and acetone and
I hate
Ciel
acetone.
um Because I'm in an organic chemistry lab.
Oh, boo hoo. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I
I
mean
would
like
I
long-term usage. It's I'm
yeah,
I've
yeah.
I do use mold remover to get them because I would rather smell bleach than have mold infestations in my house. It's a
Yep.
give and take. I'm saying like don't like if you can make a choice for something that's a little less harmful, like you don't need to use bleach on your countertops 24/7. Okay?
Please
You can use
don't.
soap. Soap, guys, soap.
I saw a TikTok of a woman, I'm not even kidding you, washing her chicken in the sink in bleach.
Yes. Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it. You're right. It was so
Like,
bad.
what?
Even
You're
the
eating that chicken,
uh
girl.
right. And that's why I don't like to use any harsh chemical
Mhm.
detergents in my dishwasher. My
Yep.
clothes, I don't have a choice because I have really sensitive skin. So I would be
Me
more
too.
lenient with that, but because I get skin rashes, I do use a natural laundry soap. But my dishes, the Cascade Plus, which they have at Walmart, and there's like an aggressive amount of them, I cannot do it. I walk down the aisle and I feel nauseous because you're literally eating that.
Yeah. And it leaves
Like
a
you're consuming
residue.
it. Yeah, I've seen. Ugh. Blech. Anyways, again, that's surprisingly controversial. I just because people say that you get too obsessive really easily when it comes to toxins, but I really don't think it's that hard to make a swap like that.
Mhm.
Sometimes they are more expensive, but if you can make it yourself out of, I do use borax actually for I used borax for a little while for dishes because it's considered a well, you can't eat it, but it's you had people were eating borax. You remember that?
No, I thought that was Tide Pods.
No, the Tide Pods was a joke, and news sources took it as like serious. But the borax thing, there were a big group of people eating it because it has like some essential nutrient in it. It's really high in something, but like it's also you shouldn't eat borax. So like I don't know. It's a weird thing. I do consider borax to be safer because it's one ingredient versus a whole like a product with a ton of ingredients in it. So I felt more comfortable using that than Cascade Plus Ultra.
Cascade Plus.
Yeah. Anyways, just I think it's pretty easy not to get obsessive as long as you're keeping it in the scope of like you can't prevent all toxins, but it's good to try to eliminate where you can in the areas
Mhm.
that are unknown.
Speaking of getting obsessive, our body does tend to get obsessive, especially with things nutritionally wise. So, like sugars and fats. This wasn't a very good transition, but stay with me, guys.
Hee hee.
Evolutionarily, we are designed to crave sugars and fats because they're the hardest things to find in nature. Unless you live in 2024, where it's everywhere. So when we
Woohoo!
encounter sugars and fats, our body's like, oh, we have finally have access to this. We need to start storing instead of using up this stuff. So we're just like, keep it all in, store it as fat, store it everywhere, keep it in our body so that when we start going through famine, we have something to fall back on. But this is really hard because we don't go through times of famine in first world countries. Some people don't go through famine in first world countries.
Right, majority. There are
Yeah,
below poverty line, there are starvation rates in America, shockingly. Actually, you know what's really interesting?
shockingly.
Malnutrition is actually becoming increasingly common in America, which sounds
Yeah.
wild because you usually associate that with starvation, but it's actually because our food is so devoid of nutrients
Yeah,
that,
it's
yeah,
because we the access we had to veggies was a lot better, and like tubers, berries, all these kinds of things that we could gather was a lot better than our access to meats, which you had to go out and work
right.
and hunt. You had to run
Hmm.
after these animals and kill them. So our
Right.
drive to eat the foods that we didn't have access to, like hard to get at fruits, hard to hunt animals, fats, that's where our drive comes from. That's what our body is primed to go and get. Veggies all of this stuff that we had access to, like veggies, greens, were a lot more common. So we don't have as much of a drive to get things that are full and rich in nutrients because we
Right.
had such access to that, but we don't anymore.
Mhm.
So we don't have that drive anymore. So we
Yeah.
have malnutrition, even though we are the most obese country. It's insane that we're
Mhm.
struggling with malnutrition as the
We have
most
almost
obese country.
yeah. We have almost the best access to groceries as well.
Right.
But it's
We
almost
get
it's
it shipped
ironic
in
because
from
right.
everywhere.
Even if we don't have it, like, if watermelons aren't in season, you better bet your local Walmart's gonna have watermelons for some
Yeah,
reason.
because we're
I
getting the
ugh,
the ones from Japan and the ones
right.
from
From
yeah,
Mexico, right? Wait, no.
I don't
No?
know.
I don't know.
Those Mexico.
I know we get a lot of imports from Mexico. Like, I think that's our biggest produce partner, I believe. Like a lot of our citrus doesn't even come from Florida anymore. The orange trees here are getting wiped out. Like it's actually a problem.
Right.
And
It's so horrible.
it's kind of unrelated, but it's mostly because of the housing influx that we've had, the influx of housing requirements. I added to that problem, but I'm here for college and then I'm dipping out. All right. Anyways, I think if we stopped importing as much food, we would kind of fix the problem to an extent because it would eliminate the idea that if you go to the store, you're going to find exactly what you need, which
Mhm.
would kind of suck because we've all grown, not all of us, but like most people grow up being able to go to the store. If you wanted a watermelon, you got a watermelon. But I have known many people in the small towns of Virginia and Maryland that I've, traversed through. If you live in a tiny town, my grandmother does now, you can only eat what's there because they don't get as
Mhm.
many shipments of things. So they go to
Yep.
local farmers. There's a guy who puts a fruit and vegetable stand, like you get 50 cents per item or something like that. It's amazing because it's kind of just his extras
Yeah.
that he doesn't sell to the grocery stores. And it's whatever's available. If he had 10 tomatoes this day, he might not have those 10 tomatoes tomorrow. He might have a squash or he might have a cauliflower. And it would all depend on the season and what the farmer chose to grow. And I think that would single-handedly fix our not fix, remedy the malnutrition problem. Because if you go
Yeah.
into a store and you have to pick from what's available, then it limits the choices. Obviously, America produces a lot of their own nasty foods. So maybe that wouldn't fix the whole problem.
I'm not gonna lie, I was waiting for you to be done so that I could say Justin
I'm
Bieber's
sorry.
not gonna be able to get his peaches down in Georgia anymore.
I hate that. I hate that so much.
There's a
I'm so
problem. They can't grow
sorry.
peaches anymore in Georgia
God.
because of the heat waves.
What about restaurants? I think there needs to be more local food restaurants.
Yeah, there's
That
one
would be because there's like
near
farm to
my
table
house and it's
places, but they're
amazing.
not common. And they're also typically very expensive.
That's one of the big problems.
Yeah. I don't know. I think this is a societal issue and a political issue that we're never going to get over. So we just have to figure out as a society how to eat with locally as much as possible when you can afford it. Farmers markets are a great resource and they do actually offer better prices sometimes depending on the area you go to than your typical Walmart. Um Obviously the more bougie areas that say, "Oh, I've got the best tomatoes in the world," they're probably going to charge you an arm and a leg for their stuff, but
Yeah.
when it comes to actual small town farming, those are usually the best deals you could ever come across.
I think we should have a petition to um get buy some land and we can all
Yes.
just everybody come. Student Sparks podcast members, come on. We're gonna start a little homestead.
Oh my
We're gonna grow
gosh.
our own food. We're gonna hunt our own animals.
That would be amazing. And it would not be in Florida. This is God forsaken down here. Okay, I'm sorry. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. I don't
But
like
you
it.
will get mauled by a crocodile.
Oh yeah.
Actually,
You
crocodiles are
can't
so cool.
they're pretty cool. I do not trust a singular body of water, even the retainment ponds outside of suburbia. Okay. Not a chance. There was a drainage puddle at the school, the elementary school I worked at, that had a crocodile in it. I mean, not a crocodile, an alligator.
So cool.
It's very cool until you're wrangling 24-year-olds.
Oh, 24-year-olds, not
Oh yeah,
24
sorry,
year
20
olds.
comma 4-year-olds. Ain't no adaptation's gonna save any of those gosh darn children. Their prefrontal lobes will not save them then. It's too their brains are too mushy for that.
Yup. I
So
can
is
attest to
mine.
that as somebody who's studying neuroscience.
I can attest to that because
Their
my
brains are
frontal lobe is
mushy.
still mushy.
Oh yeah, you've got a couple more years. They don't finish
Four of
developing
them.
until around 25. Yep.
Oh, five of them.
Yep.
Anyways. All right. We keep going on ages and ages of tangents, but we're going to look at something a little bit more serious here. So, let's talk about cancer.
There are a lot of other types of large animals that live for long, long periods of time, sometimes longer than humans, like sharks, whales, and elephants, and they all have developed cancer suppressing processes. So, why do humans struggle so much? Because cancer is like one of the biggest issues in modern medicine today. How long an animal lives is basically programmed into its genes, and there are many forms that it is. One really interesting one is telomeres. I'm not going to get into it because it's a really long tangent, but if you're interested, I would highly recommend looking into telomeres and how they dictate how long an organism lives.
There's a ton of and anti-aging research is one of the biggest things in the current age because I mean
Mhm.
we are living longer than we used to. We are doing things that are increasing our lifespan. Whether or not we're increasing the quality of life is arguable. Um, we don't get acute stuff as commonly, but like we've been saying, chronic stuff has been killing people and making quality of life for even younger people very difficult. Telomeres are really interesting because there are a lot of herbal remedies and nutrients. So like isolated nutrients, they're called nutraceuticals, which is pretty interesting. We can talk about that some other time. But these are chemical compounds that have the potential to lengthen telomeres, which is, shortening of telomeres is how we age as people. So once you reach the end of your telomere, that's when you die. That's how it's considered programmed. There is some research available on things that can lengthen telomeres, which is also associated to Alzheimer's and how that develops.
It's so interesting. So basically, animals don't usually live longer than their telomeres or other genetic processes allow them to, and usually this has to do with how long they reproduce. So once they're old enough to not reproduce, they start beginning to degrade, and their genes will slowly break down. And it's an evolutionarily favored process because once you're done reproducing, you're not evolutionarily fit anymore, like by the definition of the word fit. If you haven't heard of that, the evolutionary definition of the word fit, it's basically just how many organisms can you reproduce that are viable. So humans, like Parker was saying, have artificially increased their lifespan through modern medicine and naturopathic medicine and just a better understanding of physiology, which is it's really, really amazing. But it also means we have to deal with bigger issues, much bigger issues like cancer, which is caused by genes breaking down and producing cells that use up more energy and reproduce more than normal cells and also don't apoptose like they're meant to. Apoptosis is the process of programmed cell death. We see this happen with mice all the time in the lab, where they live around 4 years in lab and they start developing cancer at around year 2 or 3, but they don't live that long in real life. They die after a year. So we don't see cancer in mice. Our bodies have already begun to evolve better immune systems to combat this increase in cancer. And the cells that do this, they're called lymphocytes. In the lymph, you hear that a lot with natural remedies. You talk about lymph nodes, which is good. And it's really amazing that our body is doing this, but it's not quite where we need it to be at to get rid of all cancers, obviously, because we still have them. This is why nutrition and exercise are so, so important to throughout your entire life, because they actually help naturally increase your lymphocyte production and efficiency, which is really cool, which can help fight off cancer cells before they become malignant. So it's just so amazing that our body can do this if we just know how the physiology works.
that's where the idea of supporting a natural process in the body comes from with alternative medicine practitioners. A MD will suppress a fever while an ND will probably support one. Obviously, there's some
Mhm.
interconnection there. If a fever's too high, you got to lower it. But like normal processes, if it's supposed to happen, you shouldn't try to keep it from happening, which is why immunosuppressants are a difficult topic with cancer patients because on one side, somebody would say you have to support your immune function so that you can properly handle the cancer cells. But on the other side, if you suppress everything, well, you're going to get rid of the cancer, but you might die of opportunistic infection, meaning if you just get a cold or a flu or something, that could be what does you in. So it's a difficult choice to make. And it's often why people will choose either the natural or the medical route per se, because they can be done together when it comes to nutrition and chemotherapy and radiation, but you can't really support the immune system if you're doing chemo because that counteracts what you're actually trying to do
Right.
there. So that's why cancer is such a horribly difficult topic when it comes to this, because as a naturopath, you will have to decide, or your patient has to decide, do you want to risk it? Risking it is both sides. Do you want to risk getting an opportunistic infection and dying from that? Or do you want to risk dying from cancer itself and doing a therapy where you're not exactly sure if it's, because it's not considered the most popular treatment, obviously. And there's a ton of different holistic treatments for cancer. That's why it's scary because there's so many. There's people
Mhm.
who will claim it will do certain things, but the main point here is that it's difficult because we understand how cancer works. Your body understands how cancer works. Your natural killer cells are the ones that target cancer. Those are the ones that will attack and eat these cancers, like just the strong ones. If you support your ability to produce that, which is interesting because if you support your bone marrow health, you're supporting your immune system.
Mhm.
So the impact, like if you're supporting your immune health, you need to be supporting your bone health.
And then if you want to get more drastic measures of increasing your immune system, like if um, natural remedies aren't working with your cancer, we're coming up with these really insane medicines like immunotherapy, which helps to increase your immune function specifically to target cancer cells. So doing something like that in combination with holistic or naturopathic medicines is a lot easier than doing it with chemotherapy, which is basically
Oh
doing the
yeah.
opposite of what natural medicine is attempting.
Yeah, Emma was telling me about it a while ago, but there are some new actually there are hospitals that are integrating this now is immunotherapy, excuse me,
Mhm.
immunotherapy for cancer. So like you're exposing yourself to a little bit of something something to thus increase the need for your T cells and your natural killer cells, the things that are going to take care of the cancer. I have watched a lot of those little videos, the little microscopic. They're not like, I don't know if it's done under a microscope or like an electron whatever scope. It doesn't matter. Watching the natural killer eat a cancer cell, and it's
Yeah.
so cool. And like I was saying before, I don't even know if I completely finished that thought, but like if you increase the demand for those cells, it's going to be coming from your bone marrow. So like, if
Mhm.
you support your bone marrow health, then you're supporting immunity. And this is something I actually just learned recently. I didn't even think about that concept. Is like if you don't get enough good nutrients from the food you're eating, you're more likely to develop cancer because you have things like osteoporosis and like your bone health is not there. So those two things are associated, and the amount of women that get osteoporosis at this point, which I'm just using as a benchmark of bone health, is a great example of why we have more cancer, because our diets and our nutrient levels aren't supporting your immune system enough.
Mhm.
So that's I think we need to do more routine blood testing to actually see where are your nutrient levels at.
Yeah.
And I know it's done, but it's only done if they actually start seeing symptoms of something. It's not routine. Which sucks because once you start showing symptoms is when you're actually already experiencing the disease.
Yep. It's very frustrating.
So, what do we do at that point?
Yeah, you're already in the thick of it.
You're already there. So then it's hard to deprogress a disease. It's easier to prevent something than it is to treat something you already have. It's a harsh reality of both of all forms of medicine. It sucks. Anyways.
So I think from all of these three examples, the biggest takeaway here is that using we need to use the principles of evolution to better understand the human body, human physiology, and also how it interacts with natural remedies. We need to make sure that we're able to work with evolutionary mechanisms and learn what is best for our body using the understanding of how it has evolved to process and engage with everyday things that we don't even think about. It's going to be really difficult, but understanding evolutionary physiology and why we are the way we are is so important to be able to understand the intricacies, these little tiny things that we don't think about of our
Mhm.
body. Because if we
Yeah.
don't take this into account, we seem like a random bunch of things thrown together that are barely cohesive. Most
Mhm.
NDs already look at the body in this way as a cohesive unit that is built this way for a reason. But in the modern medicine world, we can definitely work more on this. Like
Oh
we
yeah.
often use treatments that just seem like they work on the surface, but don't actually, until you look into why they interact with our body that way. And then we realize, oh, we're just suppressing pain instead of curing why that pain is there, or
Right.
suppressing function instead of helping to increase it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great it's I think if medical doctors use the concept of the whole person and root causes, I hate saying the word root causes. I went over that in our in the why holistic medicine is valid, but it is an important concept of finding why is your patient feeling this way instead of saying, "Oh, you have hypothyroidism, let's put you on a thyroid medication." That will supplement, that will make a person feel better to a certain extent, but you're going to need to be on that medication for the rest of your life. Is that really what you want for your patients? And I think if they just started looking at that, then it wouldn't matter if you go to an ND or an MD. You're it'll eventually find a way to heal a person. And that's what we're missing. So from my perspective, I obviously know a lot less about evolution compared to Emma. This is her thing, this is her wheelhouse. What I am drawing from this and from a practical perspective, getting routine blood work is one of the best things you can do for yourself. If you are having unexplained symptoms that doctors are saying this isn't a big deal. This is just because you're on your period, or this is because you're a woman. This is because you're getting older. Any of those kind of things that they dismiss you for, get some routine blood work. Even food sensitivities are a controversial topic because the testing of food sensitivities isn't well established. There's not a standard for it. But things like that bring people a lot of peace of mind, and it lets them actually do something about it. If you are constantly exhausted and such, and your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, is really high, and you've been told that you're just tired because you're a mom and you got 3 kids and you're tired, this it will give you peace of mind
Mm-hmm.
and a point to start. Okay, and even the more, I'm not saying like basic panels, I'm saying like as many as you can get covered under insurance, especially if you're dealing with symptoms that you can't find a reason for. Being exhausted all day is not normal,
That's a
even though
really
it's
big one.
so common.
Yeah. I think we had so much fun recording this episode. We had lots of fun and funny parts, and also some serious, more research-based stuff. We're both very passionate about the subject, so we're
Hmm.
so glad that you guys had a listen. Thank you.
Yeah, the more tangents we go on, the more we care about the subject. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Definitely ask questions. We're gonna put our email address in the link in the description of this episode. Our Instagram DMs are also open, so feel free to slide in anytime you want. Ask questions. We like answering them, even if we don't know the answer to the question. We'll try to find it, or
We're
we'll say
here to
something
bring
dumb and make
yeah,
ourselves look foolish, but it's all in the fun of it.
we're here to bring science research to the masses. So, ask us
Hmm.
questions and we will find the answer for you. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
We had so much fun creating this episode, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
If you'd like to learn more, follow us on Instagram at studentsparks.ep, where we'll post all kinds of information and episode updates.
Don't forget to check in every other week to learn more about what it is like to be a student of neuroscience
and naturopathy.